Hello everyone, I am the Man at Kirby. Welcome to my channel, The Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews under the deck text. On this episode of The Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a face commander from the Modern Horizons 3 Precons Disa the Restless. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel and no extra cost to you. But the very best way you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. There are plenty of perks for being a patron, such as early access to certain videos, exclusive deck text, gifts, and more for as little as $1. You can also become a channel member for just 99 cents. Show off your support with the logo next to your name and exclusive emojis. Or you can always just support my channel for free by simply liking, subscribing, and sharing, which also helps out a lot. I put out a video every Monday, so you don't want to miss out. You can join my Discord server for free if you want to join the Commander Tavern community. All pertinent links are down in the description. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Disa is a 5/6 human scout with 2 triggered abilities. The first one cares about lhurgoyf permanents getting put into your graveyard from anywhere besides the battlefield. So it'll trigger if you discard or mill one, or if you tutor from your library straight to your graveyard, or if you put it into your graveyard from exile, etc. Even if they're countered since they're entering the graveyard from the stack. The point is, so long as they're not dying, it'll trigger it. If it does, the card goes straight to the battlefield. Now, while this is a powerful ability, definitely making it seem like Disa is this wondrous lhurgoyf commander, the fact remains that, as of the making of this video, there are currently only 13 commander legal lhurgoyf permanents, not including changelings. Even so, most of these lhurgoyfs and changelings are honestly quite underwhelming. Therefore, I did not build this as a lhurgoyf deck. Her first trigger is just a bonus in my deck, only caring about 3 cards total. What I focused on more was her second triggered ability. To me, this is where the spicy sauce is. And as true to my usual deck text, I build Disa super outside of the box. You won't find any decks like this one out there, at least until people get a whiff of my strategy. My logic was, why fill your deck with subpar lhurgoyfs and changelings when you could just create at least 3 tarmogoyf tokens each combat? If these kind of outside of the box deck ideas are your bag, watch on. Okay, so her second ability triggers on combat damage. That means that all we have to do is guarantee our creatures get through. And how do we accomplish that? Unblockability, of course. The deck is running 12 creatures with built-in evasion. The first 10 I'm going to discuss are Changeling Outcast, Dothy Cutthroat, Dothy Ghoul, Dothy Slayer, Dothy Voidwalker, Dothy Warlord, Nether Trader, Woo Scout, Yellow Scarf's Cavalry, and Vashta Narada. As previously mentioned, there are only 3 lhurgoyfs in my deck, one of them being Changeling Outcast, because it's a changeling. It's outright unblockable, so it's amazing here, especially at 1 mana. The rest of these creatures have either Shadow or Horsemanship, making them essentially unblockable. Others worth mentioning are Dothy Cutthroat, which can kill a creature with Shadow just in case. However, this synergizes with other cards we'll see in a moment. Dothy Warlord, which has the potential of dealing a ton of damage if we have enough Dothy or other creatures with Shadow in play. Dothy Voidwalker, which is realistically a Shadow creature you might face in a commander game, since it's the best one and actually is useful beyond being an unblockable creature, since you can steal their best card from exile. Nether Trader has a built-in reanimation effect, which is very important in the format of haphazardly cast board wipes. Vashta Narada not only has indestructibility, but it also grows whenever a creature dies that turn. Granted, it's only once per end step, but if a creature dies each end step, then it gets bigger. Filth is another creature with built-in evasion. If you're facing an opponent with a swamp, swinging into them guarantees the combat damage trigger. However, that is not the point of having Filth in here. It belongs in the graveyard along with Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth in play. This combo guarantees that all of our creatures are unblockable, especially the huge tarmogoyf tokens Disa is going to be creating, helping us end the game. The land also helps us fix our colors for black, of which the deck is heavy in. Same goes for Yamavaya Cradle of Growth, which is also here. However, none of the creatures in the deck have Forest Walk, so this is just for free color fixing. As for the 12th unblockable creature, we'll see that in a bit. As for other ways of making our creatures unblockable, the deck's running Minas Morgul, Dark Fortress, and Rogue's Passage, which don't take up spell slots in the deck. Each of these require 4 mana and tapping to make one of our creatures unblockable. However, the Fortress is best because it puts a shadow counter on the creature, making it quote-unquote permanently unblockable. If we controlled Dothy Cutthroat and really wanted to kill a creature, we can give it a shadow counter and then activate Dothy Cutthroat to kill it for that pro-gamer move. Cover of Darkness and Dothy Embrace are also included for the same reason. While this is not a typo deck, choosing lhurgoyf as the creature type for Cover of Darkness means that all of those huge tarmogoyf tokens will have Fear, which is good enough evasion for 2 mana. Dothy Embrace requires paying each time for temporary Shadow, but it can also be used in conjunction with Dothy Cutthroat to kill off any of our opponent's creatures, so keep that in mind. As for the 12th and final unblockable creature in the deck, It's a part of the most important aspect of the deck, growing our tarmogoyfs. They want as many different card types as possible in our graveyard. These being artifact, battle, creature, enchantment, instant, kindred, land, planeswalker, and sorcery. Having at least one of each in your graveyard means that Disa is creating 9 10s each time one of our unblockable creatures hits a different opponent per combat, since it triggers once per opponent, not once per creature. So the deck is running plenty of double-typed cards, 2 of them being Burnished Heart and Canoptic Wraith, with the latter being the final unblockable creature in the deck. Why such heavy emphasis on these 2 cards? Because these artifact creatures have built-in sacrifice abilities. The Wraith can be used early game to ramp, or as an unblockable creature once we have Disa in play. Once we sacrifice these for value, either of these alone is good enough to boost our tarmogoyfs by 2. Same with Greater Tanuki and Shigeki Jukai Visionary. These have built-in discard effects that allow us to get both a creature and enchantment into our graveyard quite easily. The Tanuki is mana acceleration, while Shigeki is amazing instant speed recovery that can't be countered, only stifled. This is amazing in response to having things exiled from our graveyard. Urza Saga is the only enchantment land in the deck and is incredibly useful, especially at getting Elixir of Immortality with its final chapter. While you definitely don't need Urza Saga for the deck to run, it's very easy to get both an enchantment and land in the graveyard since it self-sacrifices after chapter 3. The deck doesn't have many artifacts, but creating a token in a pinch isn't bad. The Elixir is important since the deck depends on the graveyard. Activating it in response to an opponent dropping a Bojuka Bog or Rest in Peace is useful. Sure, the cards are shuffled back into our library, essentially eliminating our graveyard anyways, but at least we don't lose our cards and can try again later. You can also use the Saga to get either Soul Ring or Wayfarer's Bauble. While these are obvious mana acceleration pieces, the Bauble is a good way to have an artifact in your graveyard just in case you don't already have any, as well as getting the extra basic. All this being said, the deck has at least 5 of each obscure type of card type, Battle, Kindred, and Planeswalker. Due to the nature of the Kindred card type, they are all double-typed by default. As for my deck, I'm running Eyeblight's Ending, Root Grapple, Breaches of Branches, Lignify, and Tarmogoyf Nest. The deck has plenty of instants due to interaction being necessary for all commander decks, but they're also Kindred cards, so at the very least they check that box, especially since the first 2 are interaction pieces of their own, with Lignify being a commander nerfer in enchantment form. Reach of Branches also synergizes amazingly with Yamavaya, making all your lands forest. The last one is the second lhurgoyf permanent in the deck, making it a bonus to discard if we had Disa in play. Speaking of discarding cards, let's see the 5 Planeswalkers: Liliana of the Veil, the Ready Scrap Savant, Lord Windgrace, Domini Raid, and Nissa Vital Force. The first 3 have discard effects with their positive loyalty abilities. Liliana hits all players, which hurt opponents while benefiting us. Even if we don't have a lhurgoyf permanent to discard, we can discard a new card type not already in the graveyard to grow our tarmogoyfs. The Ready and Windgrace get us cards back by drawing, making them more loot effects than anything. Domri and Nissa don't have discard effects but are still amazing here. They both have situational card advantage, but Nissa's is better because it's via her easily obtainable emblem, which triggers via landfall. Domri's emblem is also amazing if obtained since it gives our creatures double strike, trample, hexproof, and haste, which is absolutely busted in an aggressive deck like this one. Especially double strike, since we're hitting our opponents twice in a single combat damage step, means getting twice as many Disa triggers. But we'll see the maximization effects soon enough. Best of all, if opponents swing into these planeswalkers and we don't already have one in the graveyard, they're feeding our tarmogoyfs. As for the 5 battles, the deck is running Invasion of Urgamon, Invasion of Mercadia, Invasion of Fiora, Invasion of Innistrad, and Invasion of Ikoria. The first 2 have built-in loot effects when they enter the battlefield, which is great at filling our graveyard with different card types while also drawing cards. As a bonus, the Urgamon also gives us a treasure token. The next 2 provide interaction on entering the battlefield, with the first one being a board wipe and the second one being single target removal. The last one is perhaps the best one here since it can get the deck's 3rd and final lhurgoyf, but we'll see that in a bit. Since the deck has so many unblockable creatures, it's also very easy to transform these battles, which is a huge bonus. Truga Cliffhanger has another discard effect when it enters the battlefield in case we needed one that turn. If we do, we get to tutor for either a land or a battle, which is amazing since it's a way to get Invasion of Ikoria into our hand. Chiron Flameright is another discard outlet, but by activating, which we can do at instant speed. Not only is it another discard outlet, but it creates 2 1/1 tokens and gives all of our creatures +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. Marquesa's use is more situational, being able to either remove counters from our battles or opponents' planeswalkers, or a huge +1/+1 counter creatures. That being said, she has a card advantage trigger if we weren't dealt combat damage since our last turn. Deluge of the Dead gives us 2 2/2 zombies when it enters the battlefield, but the real use for this is opposing graveyard strategies since we can exile cards from graveyards. We get a 2/2 zombie as a bonus if it was a creature card. Zilortha is possibly the best of these though, since it has our non-human creatures dealing combat damage as though they weren't blocked. And what does Disa care about? Our creatures dealing combat damage to opponents. That being said, with a board full of huge tarmogoyfs, we'll be able to alpha strike the table regardless of blockers, since the combat damage is going straight to their faces anyways. Last but not least are the fetch lands. These are undoubtedly the easiest way to increase your card type count, since you just sacrifice them at instant speed for just 1 life, and they help fix your mana by fetching for any of the snow-covered basics, dual-typed and triple-typed lands in the deck. Thanks to all of the recent reprints, these fetch lands are now realistically cheap to get. Alright, now that we saw how to best create our Tarmogoyf army as well as pump them up, how do we make the most of them? Surely unblockable effects and Zilortha isn't everything, right? Well, let's imagine we can't swing into any opponents because of a Mexican standoff type situation or pillow forts. That's where the final lhurgoyf comes in, along with similar effects. Pyrogoyf, Terror of the Peaks, and Warstorm Surge care about our creatures simply entering the battlefield. The only exception to this is Pyrogoyf, since it only triggers off of itself and other lhurgoyfs. In any case, these effects are insane once we have all 9 card types in the graveyard. Each Tarmogoyf created will deal 9 damage to any target, whether a creature that needs killing or an opponent's face. If we're creating 3 each combat step, that's 27 damage we can deal to a single opponent, or 9 to each one. With just 2 of these 3 effects in play, it'll be enough to kill 1 opponent at once. As for the interaction mentioned earlier, we can use Evasion of Aquaria to cheat Pyrogoyf onto the battlefield straight from our library. When it enters the battlefield, if it has at least 6 power, it can deal that damage to the battle and have it transform into the Zilortha right off the bat if we needed to. While these effects are amazing if we want to kill opponents off even faster, how about increasing our Tarmogoyf production? Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, and Primal Vigor are an obvious fit here. You can also run Roaming Throne if you wanted to, but since other effects in the deck make tokens, I just went with these 3. They're pretty self-explanatory and can really make the deck explode. That being said, they're not entirely necessary for the deck to run. Rage Reflection is another way to not only quote-unquote double Disa's trigger, since you're dealing combat damage twice, but also a way to just straight up smash face. You could also kill any potential blockers first, as well as doubling any damage that does get through, especially from the unblockable creatures. Speaking of, Disa isn't the only combat damage effect in the deck. There's also Keeper of Fables, Oran Frostfang, and Toski Bearer of Secrets. While the first one triggers per opponent and not creature, the last 2 do trigger per creature. So swinging in with a huge army of unblockables will draw you a ton of cards. Plus, the Frostfang also gives Death Touch. If our attackers also had Double Strike, then you'll definitely kill any blockers before they can even hit back. Tribute to the World Tree is another way to draw an insane amount of cards because it's not restricted to non-token creature. So long as the creature has at least 3 power, you draw the card. If our Tarmogoyf tokens are big enough, we'll draw tons of cards that way. And it's going to be super easy to have at least 3 different card types in the graveyard with this deck. These effects draw so many cards that Reliquary Tower is included for good measure. It doesn't take up a spell slot in the deck, so there's no real reason not to run it, especially with Urborg and Yabamaya in the deck. Returning to Alpha Striking, Coat of Arms is another way to boost damage. Just make sure you don't play this against other type of decks. The best thing about this artifact here is that most of the unblockable creatures are Dothy, so if you have a lot of them in play, they'll get boosted by Coat of Arms, so it's not just the Tarmogoyf tokens getting pumped. As for all the instants and sorceries mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you run enough interaction, you should already have plenty of them in the graveyard. The deck's running Assassin's Trophy, Beast Within, Sundering Eruption, Fell the Profane, and Tibalt's Trickery for single target removal, Guthrie Writes History, Decimate, Windgrace's Judgment, and Casualties of War for multi-target removal, and Kindred Dominance for its board wipe. We don't want to be constantly wiping the board since our goal is to have the most threatening board state. So we can use this Soul board wipe to kill off all non-lhurgoyfs, which are going to be very other creature since this is just an obscure and small listed creature type, leaving only our army of Tarmogoyf tokens behind. As a bonus, Sundering Eruption not only doesn't take up a slot in the deck if you aren't greedy and play it as a land if you miss your land drop, but it also helps our creatures be somewhat unblockable since it prevents creatures without flying from being able to block that turn. As for protecting our own board state, the deck has Golgari Charm and Heroic Intervention. We don't have access to white, so we can't phase out our creatures in response to Farewell or an overloaded Cyclonic Rift. For those, hopefully we have Tibalt's Trickery in hand. The charm can also help to wipe the board of 1 toughness tokens for those pesky weenie army decks, or destroy Smothering Tithe, Heuristic Study, and the like. It's an amazing charm here. Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and Champion's Helm provide protection for our commander. For all effects and purposes, she's the only really important creature in the deck. Even though we have access to green, she does cost 5 the first time to cast, so she's worth somewhat protecting. Speaking of access to green, Farseek, Nature's Lore, 3 visits into the north, and Rampant Growth are naturally included for mana acceleration. They also serve as a sorcery in the graveyard after we do. The only mana fixing land not fetchable in the deck is Command Tower, but we don't really need to fetch for it anyways. It's just here, just like Sol Ring is, and even then we could technically fetch for Sol Ring if we really wanted to. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Disa the Restless. If you stayed until the end, hopefully you liked my take on it. I bet that almost every other deck tech you'll find out there is focused on actual lhurgoyf permanents and a lot of soft mill and dredge along with looting to cheat subpar creatures onto the battlefield. However, I chose to overlook that trigger instead of the second one, going full focused on making a ton of tarmogoyf tokens instead, and that really made the difference. I'm quite proud of this one. If you're interested in the deck list of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link, that also helps out the channel. I also want to thank any channel members, your membership is greatly appreciated. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am the Meta Kirby, and happy brewing.